Before I get into the video, I just want to preface this by saying that because we're still quite early in the Season of Discovery, this may not be the most optimal way to play Tank Rogue, as there is still a lot of uncertainty at the moment. The purpose of this video is to share the information that I've gathered through my own experimentation and through conversations in the Classic Rogue Discord. I also just want to take a second to point out the timestamps in the description of the video, as those will help you jump around to the different sections. But without further ado, here's my guide on rogue tanking in Season of Discovery. The first thing that you're going to need in order to tank as a rogue is 3 to 4 different runes, and the reason I say 4 is because there are 2 of them that you can actually switch between. But those 4 runes are Blade Dance, Saber Slash, Main Gauche, and the most important of all, Just a Flesh Wound. And the first one, Blade Dance, is a finishing move that increases your parry chance based on how many combo points you use, ranging from 6 to 10%. Additional combo points also increase the duration of this buff. And the next 2, Saber Slash and Main Gauche, are your combo point generators. Saber Slash is an instant attack dealing 130% weapon damage and causing a bleed that can stack up to 3 times. And Main Gauche instantly strikes with your offhand weapon, increasing your parry chance by 10% for 10 seconds. However, it's on a 20-second cooldown. So Saber Slash does a lot more damage than Main Gauche, especially because of the bleed and because it's not on a cooldown, but Main Gauche does cost less energy, and the parry chance is extra useful as a tank. However, the cooldown makes it more of a defensive cooldown rather than just a straight damage option. So if you need additional parry, you'll probably end up going Main Gauche, and if you just want extra damage or additional threat generation, you should go Saber Slash. And the final rune is Just a Flesh Wound, which is the most important and main tank rune. It passively reduces the chance that you'll be crit by 6%. It also increases the threat generation of all your abilities and turns your feint ability into tease, which is a taunt. And the final part of this is that whenever the buff from the Blade Dance rune is active, you take 20% reduced physical damage. So you can kind of see how some of these runes are starting to work together. So the easiest of these runes to collect is probably Saber Slash. There are 5 known locations at the moment, 3 for Alliance and 2 for Horde. For Alliance, there is Westfall, Loch Modan, and Darkshore. In Westfall, you'll need to pickpocket the Elite Defias Scout on the hill behind the Sentinel Hill Inn, but if you or anyone else aggroes him, he will disappear and he'll take a few minutes to respawn. So this one may take a little bit if there are lots of people around. In Loch Modan, you'll need to find a toolbox on a platform behind the quest givers at the Stone Rot Dam, and the rune should be inside that. In Darkshore, there is a pile of dirt between some tree roots by the Aberdeen Lighthouse, and the rune will be in that pile of dirt. In the Barrens, you'll need to go to Northwatch Hold, and as soon as you enter through the main gate, there is a stable to your left with a chest on its roof. To get up there though, you'll need to go up and around, drop down onto the wall next to it, and then jump onto the stable. However, you'll need a lockpicking skill of at least 80 to open the chest. And then in Silverpine, if you go to the entrance of Shadowfang Keep and look to your right, you'll actually see a small ledge with a chest on it. You can't reach it with a normal jump, but if you cast Sprint prior to jumping, you'll have enough speed to reach it. The next easiest rune is Blade Dance. There are 4 known locations for this, 3 for Alliance, Westfall, Loch Modan, and Darkshore, and 1 for Horde in the Barrens. In Westfall, you'll need to pickpocket any Defias mob until you receive an envelope, and once you open that, you'll receive a note and a key. You'll need to take that key to the cave where you normally exit the Deadmines dungeon, and the rune will be located in a chest. And since that chest is actually at the end of the cave, you don't actually need to complete Deadmines in order to reach it. In Loch Modan, you'll need to pickpocket Dark Iron Dwarves until you receive the Dark Iron Lockbox. This requires a lockpicking skill of 1 to open it, so you pretty much just need to know the skill, but the rune should be inside of it. In Darkshore, you'll need to kill the Naga and Cliffspring Cave until they drop a key, which you'll then use to unlock a chest at the end of the cave. However, there is a pack of mobs surrounding it, so you may need help clearing them out just before opening it. And in the Barrens, you'll need to pickpocket the South Sea Cannoneer south of Ratchet to get the Buccaneer's Matchbox item. You'll then take that item to the nearby wooden camp, which is at these coordinates, and then click on the gunpowder bucket to blow it up. There'll then be a chest that you can open with the rune inside. And the last 2, Main Gauche and Just a Flesh Wound, actually end up being pretty time consuming and grindy to actually obtain. But for Main Gauche, it's actually sold by an NPC named Grisby in the inn at Ratchet. However, you need to complete 3 turn-in quests in order to purchase it. None of the items are actually considered quest items and can all be farmed and sold on the auction house, so you may be able to buy them if the prices are low on your server, but if you can't, you may need to farm them yourself. But the items you'll need are 24 fish oil, which can be farmed from the Murlocs in Hillsbrad or south of Menethil Harbor, 20 Dark Iron Ordnances, which drop from the elite Dark Iron Dwarves in Northern Wetlands, and 16 Shredder Turbochargers, which drop off Shredders in Stone Talon when you use the Shredder Auto Salvage unit on their corpses. The Shredder Auto Salvage unit is actually an item made by engineers, and the recipe actually drops from Deadmines. So if you are an engineer, you can make these yourself, but if not, you may need to buy them on the auction house. Just note, however, that these are a one-time use and that the turbochargers are not a guaranteed drop. So it may end up being more cost-effective to actually purchase the turbochargers outright, depending on how they're priced on your server. But once you've turned all these items in, Grisby will then give you a quest to return to your capital, and once you turn that, you'll actually be sent back to him and you'll be able to purchase the rune for 5 gold. And the final rune, and the most most grindy of all is Just a Flesh Wound. And this is probably one of the most frustrating and time-consuming things that I've done in a long time. So it's actually purchased from the new supply factions, the Azeroth Commerce Authority for Alliance and Duratar Supply and Logistics for Horde, but you actually need to reach Honored before you're able to buy it. And the only way to build up your reputation with these factions is to find waylaid supplies from random drops and then turn them into one of the supply faction NPCs in any capital city. So you have the option of turning them in as they are, but you get much more reputation by filling them with their specified items before turning them in. The biggest problem with this though is that you can only carry one supply crate at a time. So if you're farming them, I recommend finding a location in a zone with a flight path close to any of your capital cities. As of now, since the drop rates of supply crates is actually pretty garbage from higher level mobs, the current best strategy seems to be farming chest spawn locations. I'm sure the Rogue Discord and anyone else currently farming these for their runes will absolutely hate me for this, but if you're doing the grind at level 25, I recommend going to the Knoll Camps in Red Ridge, just north of Lakeshire, the Knoll Camps in Wetlands, or Durnhold Keep in Hillsbrad Foothills. There's probably plenty of other locations, as long as there's lots of chests. If you'd like to know the chest spawn locations, I recommend getting the add-on Gathermate 2 to display them on the map, but there's another add-on that goes alongside this called Gathermate 2 Data Wowhead Classic. And once you have that, you'll actually need to go into the Gathermate 2 options in-game and enable that data by checking the treasure box and clicking the import button. But once you finish the grind and hit Honored, you'll finally be able to purchase the rune from the same supply NPCs you turned the crates into for 4.5 gold. And then, once you have that, you're pretty much all set to tank. The next thing you'll probably want to do is respec for tanking. What seems to be the most common tanking spec is combat. So you would start with 2 out of 2 improved Sinister Strike, reducing the energy cost of your Sinister Strike by 5. And this applies to both Saber Slash and main Gauche, depending on which one you're using. We then go 3 out of 5 Lightning Reflexes to increase your dodge chance by 3%. And then we take 5 out of 5 Deflection to increase your parry chance by 5%. And then we take Riposte, which costs 10 energy that deals 150% weapon damage and disarms the target for 6 seconds, but has a 6-second cooldown. However, it only becomes active after parrying an attack. This becomes very good with the Deflection talent and with Blade Dance, and also with main Gauche if you choose to run that instead. But I find that in this current phase, you don't actually end up needing that much parry. And so for our last few points, you actually have 2 different options. You can go into Endurance to reduce the cooldown of your sprint and evasion by 1.5 minutes, and then put your last 3 points into Precision to increase your hit chance by 3%, or you can put all 5 points into Precision to increase your hit chance all the way up to 5%. I personally like to take Endurance because of the reduced evasion cooldown, but ultimately it's up to personal preference. So what about stats? What should we prioritize as a tank rogue? I'm going to take a second to first break down how different stats actually work for rogues. And the 3 main stats that I'm going to be looking at are Strength, Agility, and Stamina. Stamina is an easy one, it just gives you additional health, but Strength and Agility are a little tricky. Both give 1 attack power per stat point, but Agility has the added benefit of granting you additional crit and dodge chance. The values aren't exact, but you can usually estimate that 1 Agility will give you about 0.1% extra crit chance and 0.2% extra dodge chance. So it'd take about 10 Agility to get a full 1% additional crit, and 5 Agility to get about 1% increased dodge. So it currently looks like Agility and Stamina will be the primary stats to focus on, as we want to maximize our dodge and maximum health, but the crit chance from the Agility is also nice because it gives us a bit of extra damage, which turns into extra threat. As for the question of which of these 2 we should prioritize, I'm not entirely sure at the moment, but I would probably wager that a nice balance between the 2 would probably be pretty good. Moving on to the rotation. Your rotation ultimately revolves around maintaining the Blade Dance buff as much as possible. This is because of its parry buff, but primarily because we only receive a 20% damage reduction from Just a Flesh Wound while Blade Dance is active. So ideally, you should keep Blade Dance up as often as possible and it should never drop. On single target fights, I recommend starting with either 2 Saber Slashes or 1 Sinister and main Gauche, and following that up with a 2 combo point Blade Dance. If the target dies quickly, or if they don't do very much damage to you, you can then use Slice and Dice with 1 to 2 points for additional damage, which in turn gives you extra threat generation. However, I would only cast Slice and Dice if you know that you'll be able to generate enough points to keep the Blade Dance buff active. And since each combo point only increases the parry chance of Blade Dance by 1%, in most cases, if the mobs aren't doing a whole lot of damage, it actually doesn't matter how many points you spend on your Blade Dance. The main thing that matters is just keeping the buff up so you get the damage reduction from Just a Flesh Wound. So if you only have 1 point and your Blade Dance is about to run out, it's probably better to cast a 1-point Blade Dance instead of taking the few seconds of no damage reduction. If your target is a boss, or if it just doesn't die quickly and deals a lot of damage, instead of casting Slice and Dice, you'd instead start working towards building up and maintaining a 5-point Blade Dance. Or you also have the option of pulling with Evasion and immediately start building towards a 5-point Blade Dance if you'd like. And during your fights, regardless of how many targets, you'll also be wanting to cast Riposte whenever it procs. However, it's important to remember that it does cost 10 energy, so I would not cast Riposte if your Blade Dance is about to run out and you only have enough energy to reapply the buff. When it comes to multi-target though, things get a little bit trickier. With 2 to 3 targets, you're usually doing alright, but anything past that, it can get a little bit awkward. But for 2 targets, you'll begin by attacking target 1 in order to apply a 2-point Blade Dance and to build threat on that target. And once your points are spent, you'll then want to switch to target 2 and use Taunt or Riposte if it's available. And then you'll begin building combo points onto target 2. I find that switching targets after each finisher distributes your threat quite equally, and then you don't have to worry about losing your combo points. But if you'd like to target one mob specifically and try and get that one down as fast as possible, I would use all your combo combo point generators and finishers on that target, but after each finisher, you'd probably want to use riposte on the other target in order to help maintain threat, and taunt if it drops. You can sometimes fit a 1 to 2 point slice and dice in between your blade dances, but just as before, keep in mind that blade dance is still your highest priority, so even a 1 point blade dance would be better than not having it at all. For 3 targets, just as before, you're going to build a 2 point blade dance on target 1, then you'll use riposte on target 2 and taunt if needed, and then once you have threat on those 2 mobs, you'll switch to target 3, building 1 to 2 combo points to spend on either slice and dice or blade dance if you need to reapply it. And then you'll probably want to switch back to target 2 and begin building threat and combo points onto that target. And then after that, you pretty much just switch between targets after each finisher as needed to maintain threat. Just remember though, it's okay to drop threat every now and then as a rogue tank, and you're definitely going to on certain trash packs, especially once you start fighting more than 3 mobs. So if you lose aggro for a few seconds, don't panic. Most classes actually have enough armor or damage mitigation to handle a few hits. It's really only when you start ignoring the mobs that you lose aggro on that the real problem occurs. So if you end up having one of those awkward situations where a mob drops threat and you currently have combo points on your current target that you don't want to lose, it's okay to wait just a second for an energy tick, cast slice and dice or blade dance with however many combo points you have, and then immediately taunt or begin attacking the mob that you've dropped. I'm sure that there are certain mobs that are extra dangerous that you would 100% want to just completely throw away your combo points to taunt if they're that much of a threat, but it seems like in this current phase, there's not a whole lot that's super threatening. And then moving on to anything higher than 3 packs, so packs of 4 mobs or more, these can end up being pretty awkward or difficult for rogue to effectively manage, but I find that the best way to handle these situations is to constantly be switching between targets, weaving taunt on one target and riposte on another in between 1 to 2 point blade dances or slice and dices. But that's pretty much just the rotation. One thing that I really like about it is that it's very reactive. You'll be addressing a bunch of different situations as they come up, especially with multiple mobs. So the best thing to kind of do is to play it by ear and address them with all the different tools at your disposal. And it's only going to get even better in future phases once we get more CC and Blade Flurry to actually get a bit of AoE. But before I end it, I just want to take a few seconds to talk about poisons. If you really just want to maximize damage, you can probably just use double instant poison. I think it's also a good idea to consider crippling and mind-numbing poison. Crippling poison will give you a 30% chance on each hit to slow your target by 50% for 12 seconds. And this will be very useful for stopping mobs that are trying to run away from you, especially in tight spaces like in stockades. In the footage that I've used throughout this video, I wasn't wearing crippling, and it was a huge mistake because mobs kept running into other rooms and pulling more stuff, although some of that was also just the other people pulling things because they were a little underleveled. But anyways, looking at mind-numbing poison, this gives each strike a 20% chance to increase the cast time of your target by 40% for 10 seconds. This one is a bit more situational, as you'd only really want to use it on casters, but since casters aren't really doing any damage while they're casting, so if you just increase that length of cast time and then have someone interrupt right at the end, that mob has pretty much just wasted all of that time doing no damage to you. But even if it's a boss or something that can't be interrupted, the increased cast time would still be very good because again, longer casts mean more time of taking no damage. But aside from that, that's pretty much all I have for the rogue tank, so thank you.